Greetings and bienvenue, MITZU. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Anyone had any crazy experiences from their childhood? I got one. Staying over at my wealthy uncle's house up north to visit my cousin Jay. Get to uncle's house and greet Jay, his two older brothers T and D, and their dad, my uncle, R. Immediately me and Jay go about the house and play. It's a fairly large two-story house, with stairs that as you go up, overlook all of the living area. After having our fun in the living area, we moved upstairs. As I made my way up the last step, I was greeted by an out-of-season Christmas decoration, a life-size electronic Santa Claus, with a moving mouth and cheesy Christmas music accompanying it. I never took my eyes off it as I made my way to Jay's room. Once in Jay's room, we kick-started our night that included Pokemon cards, PlayStation, Nintendo, and other 90s childhood things. After an hour of playing or so, I had to piss. Making my way to the restroom included passing that Santa decoration, which was outside the door on the left, in the case you're walking out of the restroom. I followed it until I got in and closed the door, making note that it was on the left. After doing my business, I opened the door and walked out. The Santa was on the right this time, eyes just gazing as if it knew it was staring. My heart froze, but I kept walking, thinking that my cousin just pranked me. I open his door and find him. I scold him for scaring. He tells me that he didn't do anything, because I would have heard the door and the floor. All the doors on the second floor remain closed, and their floors are a bit squeaky. I think about it for a second, and realize that I heard no noise when this occurred. I get frozen in fear, but continue to blame it on him, assuring myself that the decoration couldn't have moved on its own. Fast forward to nighttime, me and Jay laying on the living area couch, watching cartoons on his big square flat-screen TV. The TV is directly below the stairs. Jay is on the couch directly in front of the TV, while I'm on the side couch after watching TV for a few hours. Jay falls asleep. In the position I was in, I could see the stairs as well as the TV. After watching for a minute, I see a black mass from the corner of my eye, coming from the top of the stairs. It was very visible as the stairs were lit, and the wallpaper was yellow. As I would get up and focus on it, it would retreat slowly. I thought it was my eyes and laid back down. Then it happened again. This time more came out. I focused on it, but it lingered. It was too vivid to be my eye playing tricks. Scared, I shot up out of the couch and stood up and stared at it for a minute. Then suddenly, it disappeared. After that, I hid under the covers, not peeking my head out once. I fell asleep and woke up in the morning along with Jay. I denied all that happened last night and continued like it never happened. Went home that day and never thought much of it.
Merry Christmas Eve/X/. I hope everyone is cozy with some eggnog or ale of their persuasion and having a good time. Does the Christmas season remind anyone of anything creepy that happened as kids? I'm not sure if it's the same now, but growing up in Ontario, Canada, in elementary school, we had 2 weeks off around Christmas. That's where my memories take place. Be me, grade 6. I had a ragtag group of friends, one of which was named Nikolai. I was always dragging him on what a grade 6 kid thinks of as adventures, like almost urban exploring, where you basically pretend to be in Mission Impossible planning to get into a site, then finding some reason to bail. Though our hometown was relatively small, anything outside of 6 kilometers from either of our houses was a perilous journey as kids. We felt so adult and badass back then. Growing up around preps, we felt cooler for even thinking of doing this stuff. I always find holidays make everyone braver, more excited, or being on the precipice of them. Through a mutual old friend, I had found the location of a now demolished factory. At the time, it was still standing, and it was massive. Massive to a couple of kids who were hankering to just get into an abandoned shed. To experienced urbexers, it really wouldn't have been much. To us, it was a castle. We planned our entry for the month preceding our 2-week vacation. We were running the classic, tell our parents we were staying at each other's houses, then go out for the night scheme. Given our tender age, all we had were a couple of dingy flashlights, my father's Olfa utility knife, and a small steak knife from Nico's kitchen. We set course using the blizzard as cover so nobody would see us on the property. We get there and the plan is, as neither of us had ever been camping prior to this, to do it on the roof. Yes, in hindsight, this was not the brightest plan. It had already been snowing for a couple of days, so the streetlights lit up the snow beautifully. I remember recalling even then, there were many parts to the factory with raised or lowered roofs. The 2 parts that were immediately accessible to us were accessible via 2 ways. A ladder on the side of the building went to a lower portion of the roof, very visible from the ground. A decommissioned crane that led to a higher part that couldn't be seen from ground level. We debated which area to go to. Obviously, the crane-accessible route was more heroic and cool to us. But there was a big problem. I was and am positively petrified by heights. Even as a teenager hopping the school fence, I distinctly remember one night I was at the top of a fence, legs on either side, the fence being a little wobbly and me being paralyzed with fear. Pathetic? Absolutely. Would I cross the fence now? Absolutely not. Nikolai was also a little afraid of heights, but only a normal amount, not enough that this wasn't out of the question. We start walking to the midpoint between the ladder and the crane. I've always heard that it's warmer in winter when it snows. It could be a stupid saying that maybe is indisputably false and stupid, but in my experience it's been true. The air wasn't unbearably cold, though Nikolai was wearing old sweatpants and a coat a year or two too small for him, myself sporting a Walmart faux leather jacket that couldn't do up, and my mother's old gardening gloves. To be young again, now I wear 2 pairs of thermals under my jeans and my bones still feel cold. But I digress. After some argument, and to my dismay, he started climbing the crane. I begin walking over to the ladder. It's near blackout, only the street lights a little ways away giving us any light. I dig out my torch and light the way. The snow crunches under my feet. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The door to the small building on my right starts creeping open. Sounds like someone walking on all fours, very rambunctious, rapid. Fight or flight kicks in. I choose to stand there like a dumbass. Again, paralyzed. I'm too nervous to even call over to Nico. I stare as behind cover as I can be. I'd always been interested in spooky shit, and I'd heard a story my friend's older sister told recently about a cannibal who walked on all fours. The unnatural thought had unnerved me as a lad to the core, and my imagination likened my current situation to this. It gets closer and the door fully opens and a black figure darts out. I scream, "You all right? What was that?" Ashamedly, I yell back, "Just a cat." I start climbing and the metal feels cold under my gloved hands. I start feeling bad for Nico since he had no gloves and his climb was going to be significantly higher and longer than my own. I yell up telling him to come down and take my gloves, but he says it'd be faster and easier for him to just get up there now without them. We're both on our respective ledges. I'm about to yell up to him to look for another way for me to get up to him to see if there's a ladder on another side or something, but a car pulls in. We had prepared for this, planning for every possible scenario. We bought walkie-talks we saved up for to be as tactical as possible. They would have been great if I hadn't reached into my pocket and realized I was still holding on to his. He looked down at me and yelled for me before also seeing the car, then promptly shutting up. The car parked directly under my area, and 3 men got out and dragged a 4th one by the shoulders from the back seat. From my vantage point, I could see all the Christmas lights around me, bright and true. I always loved the bright lights. The 3rd man who wasn't dragging the last gentleman punched him in the face. They dragged him inside. The problem was, with this factory, that there was no door. There was simply a large, probably 7-meter by 6-meter opening in the wall. Being on the roof, we could not see how far away they were inside, or if they were still watching us. We could only gauge by sound. The blizzard was silent. There were no cars in the industrial district buzzing by anymore at 9 a.m. on this Christmas Eve. The only sounds were the scuffling on the wet brick interior floor and the gentleman's muffled screams and whimpers. I suddenly regret thinking mafia movies were cool. From what I could gather, this wasn't some high-level crime syndicate, just some low-level junkies, and the one being beaten stole one of the other's weed and cash. Eventually, the echoes got further. The interior of the factory was a straightaway that went in deep. Deep enough that their noises could be far away enough that we can't hear them, but also not too far away that they wouldn't see us by the time we both had climbed down. Nikolai looks over to me about 2 minutes after they've gone inside and spreads his arms out, motioning, "What do we do?" I gauge that it's safe for us to climb down, and I do so quickly, hiding near the gate not too far from the bottom of the crane. I see the guys inside, the man in the back facing outwards to us but smoking and on his phone, not really paying attention outside. I'm suddenly very thankful we waited until the cover of the blizzard to do this, even though it was honestly originally to make it feel cooler. Nikolai halfway down when his foot slips. He hangs on fine, but he kicked up a piece of rubber that fell. The rear man from inside sees the falling rubber, and another piece of sheet metal goes down with it. He starts walking out, and I can't yell at Nico when someone's coming, just hoping he makes eye contact with me. By pure coincidence alone, the other guys call him back over, and by the time he makes it back to them, Nikos backs down. We're about to go through the gate until we both see another guy in the driver's seat that we couldn't previously see from our bird's eye view. I point to the other side of the property, a feral cat's den who usually didn't bother us, that led to a patch of forest, a park, and then a path that was a quick 6-minute walk, 3 if you're a terrified teenager, to a brightly lit Fast Eddie's, McDonald's for Canadians, and a bus stop to take us home. After I make the motion, Nico begins his jaunt and looks back at me. I motion that I'll be with him in a hot minute. I stay hiding and look inside with morbid curiosity. They drag the gentleman back into view and kick him one last time, and he stops moving. I'm no doctor, and I hate to make the story less dramatic, but it didn't look like he killed him. It looked like he just passed out. They dragged him into a room on the right with a heavy metal door and stacked a few breeze blocks in front of the door. They begin to head back to the car, and I take this as my cue to join up with Nikolai. We double time it quietly from cover to cover until we're at a safe distance to cut through the forest and make it back home. Usually people say we had a silent walk home, or we never talked about it again. But we were in grade 6, and given that we had both survived, this was the coolest thing to ever happen to 2 losers. It's only after I look back that I realize had we been caught, we also could have either gotten hurt pretty bad or worse. Stupidly enough, this wasn't enough to change how we thought about our castle, and we headed back many more times that winter. I told him about what I had seen behind the door, and it was an unspoken rule that we never opened the door. The breeze blocks were still there, but there we knew parties were being held in the building from all the crushed beer cans and little put-out campfires. Years later, Nikolai and I drifted apart. We were great friends, but the people you knew as kids will never be the same people as when you're older. In high school, I met my now wife, and I can honestly say that she's my best friend. Also likes urban exploring, but I'm not as risky as when we were kids. I only pick spots that are small enough to fully check out on my own and are close enough to civilization that if something goes south, then we're not totally out of luck. I told her this story a while back, and this winter we went back to the factory just today. The main areas are demolished now, but a few rooms still stand. The area from that night is still there. After taking a good look around, my wife is about to go back to the car, and I tell her she can start it up. I'll be there in a minute. The breeze blocks are long gone. The doorway from before is just an old piece of plywood hanging by a thread. Knife drawn, ready to take on the world, I swing the door open. There's a bunch of beer cans, a mannequin, and 2 doorways. Don't know why we thought a guy was dead in there for years. Probably woke up 3 hours later, sober and confused, and moseyed at home. I'm a licensed private investigator now, so I took the mannequin home and polished it off, and now store my gear on it as a funny memento. Hope my kids will be smarter than my friends and I, but know that they won't. I love my wife, and though I don't talk to any of my old friends anymore, I'm grateful to have those memories at all, and the ones I'm making now. Merry Christmas, Nikolai, all my old friends, and to all of /x/.
I only have one, but I guess that's a good thing. Be about 14 or 15. Can't remember, but I just started high school. Have a small bedroom with an elevated bed, maybe 5 feet high. Long night of studying, just past midnight. Time for bed.jpg. Door is still open, the hallway light on, the connecting bathroom door open. Parents downstairs watching TV. Climb in bed, turn off my lamp, and start counting sheep. Having a difficult time sleeping, so I sit up and think, maybe a glass of water would help. Look towards my bathroom. It's unusually dark. There's a window where you can see the streetlights just outside, but not tonight. I just sit in my bed, watching as the darkness creeps along my floor and walls, engulfing my room slowly. Sinking back into my covers, it must be my eyes messing with me. Get the courage to look back out into my room. Lighting is normal, but I can't see the hallway light or my door for some reason, just pitch black in that direction. I notice the darkness has a shape, very tall, very skinny, very wispy. I remember the shape of its head, slender and ovular, tapering off at the top into a wisp. This shape looks barely humanoid, so I'm freaked out, afraid to move or speak to let it know that I'm awake. Time feels like it slows down, my hearing is muffled, my sight gets blurred, then my doors both slam. The breaker in the house trips. I can hear my parents cursing downstairs, thinking I'm slamming doors and messing with my outlets or something. My father bangs angrily on my door. My room is pitch black again, and the door is somehow locked. The air is so thick now, it's getting super hard to breathe. My parents' voices are muffled as well, but another voice echoes in my head very softly but very clearly. I can only make out certain words, but I hear the voice mention things of loneliness, and being buried and dying a slow, painful death. Then my father breaks down my door and tells me how badly I'm going to get an ass whooping. It feels like the darkness has fled, but I'm left with a severe headache. Even so, I explode out of bed and grab my father and hug the hell out of him, telling him that all of that had nothing to do with me. I went to school the next day, aced my test, and took a nap in third period. To this day, my father doesn't believe me. My mother knew otherwise, though, and vouched for me so I don't get beat to a pulp. Later that week, we spread blessed rice on my windowsills, salt the corners of my room, and have a dream catcher put up next to my door. I've moved out since, but I took that dream catcher with me. Ever since that night, I've had migraines almost daily. Even my wife believes that the dream catcher is protecting me from something at night, so she makes sure that it's hanging by the door every night before we sleep.
It was less than a week to go before Christmas, and John had once again been roped into doing a favor for his big sister. He didn't mind helping her out on occasion, but it seems that every time he visits his family, she will ask him to do something before she's so much as said, "Hi, how are you doing?" On this particular occasion, his chore was to look after her 2 dogs, whilst she and her family went to spend a couple of days relaxing at their overpriced holiday lodge. It wasn't a chore so much, as the dogs weren't the kind that craved constant attention, but being the breed they were meant that they had to be walked twice a day for at least an hour, or they'd end up restless and fretting, and would generally make a nuisance of themselves for hours on end. It's not that John was particularly lazy. He just had things he'd rather be doing than walking dogs each morning and evening. As the time for their evening walk approached, he begrudgingly fitted both dogs with their harnesses. It was only just after 5 p.m., but the sun had already completely set and had given way to a cloudless black canvas of icy white pinpricks in the sky. It was also strangely cold, more so than it had been since winter had begun to draw in some weeks previously. Donning his coat, woolen hat and gloves, he makes sure he picks up the keys and leaves via the front door, the excited dogs paving the way for him. 10 minutes into the walk, he comes to what has, for many years, been affectionately known as No Man's Alley, a stretch of tarmac roughly half a mile long that is hidden from any road and far from most housing estates, and was surrounded by trees on all sides. He hadn't trodden this particular path since he was a child, but he knew it well enough, even in the dark. Something felt increasingly wrong, though he couldn't say what. After a moment of walking down the alley, he realizes that the only light visible is that radiating from the full moon in the sky. All of the street lights were off, as though they were on a timed setting which hadn't been changed to take into account the longer nights. No matter, the glow from the moon gave everything a beautiful and ethereal sheen, much preferable to the way the area looked in the light of day. The temperature seems to drop a little, causing him to pull up the hood on his jacket, further shielding his recently shaven head and neck from the chill. It didn't seem to work. Shivering slightly, he notices that both of the dogs are reluctant to go on. As he looks further down the path, he notices that they're close to the overpass, where no moonlight seemed to penetrate, and he was suddenly filled with a sense of dread. He wasn't sure why. He'd followed this route quite literally dozens of times before in the past with no problems, but for some reason, tonight was different. Maybe it was a combination of the chill, the strange moonlight, and the uneasiness of the dogs, all working together to make an otherwise unshakable man think twice about walking ahead. After standing and staring into the darkness for what felt like a lifetime, one of the dogs begins to whine pitifully and pull in the opposite direction. He takes this as his cue and begins to cautiously make his way back to the warmth of his sister's house and a well-needed cup of tea. He can see the streetlights up ahead some 20 minutes later when he first hears them. Footsteps behind him, almost but not quite in time with his own, as though he was being stalked by somebody who didn't want to be heard. He turns suddenly only to be faced with an empty space. There is nobody in sight, not even a wild animal or strayed dog. He begins to think that maybe it was just his own footsteps echoing strangely and playing tricks on his already frayed sanity. He turns back around and decides that maybe something stronger than a cup of tea would be needed tonight. He quickened his pace a little and noticed after a moment or two that the footsteps were still there, keeping up with him. As the footsteps appear to get closer, he begins to hear something else. Just at the edge of his hearing, light and regular breathing. The dogs are now pulling against their harnesses as hard as they can, neither one of them looking back over their shoulders, almost as if they are as intent as possible on getting home safe, or at least to the safety of the streetlights. He risks a quick glance over his shoulder, dreading what he would see, but once again there is nothing there. His heart is now pounding in his chest, a very real fear gripping him, such as he hasn't felt since he was a child suffering from night terrors. Somehow, though, he knows that if he could just reach the safety of the streetlights, everything will be all right. He decides to run, just to be sure. The lights weren't that far ahead now. Even though he's out of shape, he can make it in just a few moments. Less than 20 seconds later, he finds himself bathed in the glow of the streetlight, and almost instantly the fear gripping his heart subsides. As he stands there panting, he looks back in the direction in which he has come from, only to see absolutely nothing. Yet despite there being nothing there, he gets the feeling that something out there is now angry with him, and that no matter what, he shouldn't venture back down that path. Brushing that thought away, he decides that he should still take the dogs home as quickly as he can. 20 minutes later, and he's relaxing with a glass of single malt, his feet up on the couch, whilst watching a famous street magician on the television and chatting to some friends on Facebook via his laptop. He's already beginning to forget the feeling of sheer terror he'd experienced less than half an hour earlier. Maybe it had all been in his head. As the hours begin to fly by, he starts to feel sleepy and decides to head up to bed. Ignoring his sister's wishes completely, he allows both of the dogs to accompany him up the stairs, as they often like to sleep at the foot of the bed, and there's always something reassuring about hearing their grunts and snores as he drifts off. He awakes suddenly, wanting to scream, being reminded once again of all of those times during his childhood when he was unable to hold the scream in. Back then, a simple nightlight had been all that was needed to ease his fears. If only he had one of those now. He looks at his mobile phone and sees that it's only 4 a.m. Then he hears what had woken him up. The dogs had managed to shut themselves out of the bedroom somehow and were now whining and pawing at the door. Just as he is about to climb out of the bed to open the door, something stops him dead in his tracks. The room is now lit only by moonlight, as the street light outside of the bedroom window was distinguished. The terror grips him once again, twisting his gut until it's nigh on unbearable. Then he hears the breathing, closer now than it had been earlier. He notices a patch of darkness in the corner of the room, a roughly human-shaped shadow, slightly darker than the shadows surrounding it. As it moves towards him with an unearthly grace and a terrible sense of purpose radiating from it, he feels pinned in place, completely unable to move. The only thing he can do is scream uncontrollably as the shade leans over him and whispers almost tenderly into his ear, "Finally, I have you." He awakes drenched in sweat and still screaming from the night terror. He couldn't remember them being this bad since he was a child. Maybe he should mention it to his doctor on his next visit. He notices that he had accidentally urinated in his fear, and immediately disgusted and ashamed with himself, sets to stripping the bedding and making it ready to wash. The last thing his big sister would want is to return home to a bedroom stinking of pee. He decides to head to the bathroom to clean himself off before making a start on cleaning the bedsheets. As he opens the bedroom door to head to the bathroom, he disturbs both of the sleeping dogs, who, upon seeing him, immediately run away and down the stairs with a cacophony of yelping and growling, almost tripping over each other in the process. After giving them a bewildered look, John heads to the bathroom and proceeds to clean himself and his pajama pants. He takes a look at himself in the mirror before heading back to the bedroom. Something seemed a little different, but he couldn't quite tell what. He switches off the bathroom light and heads back to the bedroom. As he turns to leave, he doesn't notice that his reflection in the mirror hasn't moved since he'd switched off the light. In fact, it was watching his every move with a feral smile on its face. It had waited more than 20 years to get this far again. Surely another day or two of waiting wouldn't be so bad.
Be 17. Be in the New Mexico desert in the middle of nowhere. Be Christmas. It's cold as balls for once and snowed. For once. Be reading Harry Potter the entire time I've been there. It's nighttime. Time to read more and not sleep. Because screw that. I have Harry Potter. Oh wait. I left that in the library on the entire other side of the other house. The house I'm in is actually 2 houses, you see. I make my way through the darkness of the houses. It's around 3 a.m., and everyone is already asleep. I had been playing Pokemons, but it died, so Harry Potter. Get to the kitchen, suite almost there. I struggle to find the light switch, because there is no light. It is the desert at night, no light. I decided to blindly go towards where I know the long hallway is. I'm in the hallway when I hear a voice that belongs to no one. I know say my name in a whisper, slowly. My blood runs cold and I stop and say, yes. No answer. Find a light switch after falling over everything in the way. There's no one there. Search hallway, kitchen, and surrounding areas. No one at all. Check family. Everyone is asleep. Go to the library and get Harry Potter. Make it back to the hallway and realize I have to turn off the light and go back. Backtrack and turn on the lights to where my room is. Go back, turn the lights off on the way back to my room. Lock my door and don't sleep till sunrise.
A messed up delivery. What up, X-Files? Got a green text for you. Happened to me back in December. Some background info. I've worked in this pharmacy for several years now. We're a local pharmacy, not a major chain store, and we deliver to people for free if they ask us to. Our delivery driver dude goes out around 11 every day and does all the deliveries. Normally, if you miss that window, you gotta wait till the next day. Without further ado, let's begin 4 o'clock on a Thursday. Slow as F, the only people coming in are those who want flu shots or miscellaneous over-the-counter stuff. Tylenol, etc. We're overstaffed for such a slow day, but no one wants to leave. Christmas spending money. The phone rings. It's a frequent flyer, batshit crazy. Sobbing and screaming at us that they didn't get their sleep meds and that they need them. Screw it, whatever. I'll humor her by looking into it. Turns out she actually did have some that could be filled, she just didn't ask for them. Go figure. They had their license taken forever ago for being psychotic, so she asks if we can deliver. Awkward silence amongst employees. I don't want to lose the customer, but our delivery driver is gone for the day. Not to mention this person lives like 20 miles out in the middle of nowhere. The pharmacist asks if I mind delivering. I'm bored, sure, why not? We don't have the brand she normally likes, but it's the same medicine. Try to call her back to let her know in advance. Get a busy signal on the phone. Try 2 more times over a 10-minute period. Second time, another busy signal, then just radio silence. She'll just have to deal with it. I set out on my adventure. For perspective, we're already in a rural area, and she's way out in the woods. If the woods are the sticks, this place is in the roots. The sun is already setting, yay daylight savings time. Less and less traffic or signs of human life as I go nearer to this woman's home. Get a generally uneasy feeling about it. Shrug it off, probably just anxiety. I'm a nervous person anyways. The house is down a dirt road in a dark pine forest. Have to drive about 3 minutes down the dirt road before you reach the home. The woman has a lot of cats, like 6, chilling on the porch, and some yard chickens doing whatever it is chickens do. When I shut the car door, I hear something in woods fly off. See several crows leaving a nearby tree branch. Neat.jpg. Very small home. As I get on the porch, realize this place is probably older than the dirt road. In seriously bad condition. Cobwebs all over corners of the porch. Chains holding up porch swings rusted all to hell. 0 out of 10 would not sit on. Cats all just staring me down, knock on the door, waiting. Radio silence from the woods save for the wind. Getting progressively more uncomfy. Knock again. Is this woman really not home? Knock a third time. Oh, come in. Go in home. Home is in shambles. Clothes and trash strewn everywhere. Why am I surprised? The couch has several obvious tears in it. There's paint on the recliner. Like someone spilled black paint all over the brown leather. Claw marks all over the walls. Hopefully from cats. Find the woman in the kitchen. She's hunched over the sink, washing her hands. She seems far more stable than she was on the phone. Maybe this won't be too bad then. Explain to her about the brand change. Totally calm and accepting of it. Something feels off. She's still washing her hands. Ask if she wants me to leave the medicine on the table. Says she wants to look at it before I leave. Turn the water off. Just hovers over the sink, moving her hands as if she was drying them, but she has no towel. There are pots and pans on the stove, but the stove is not on and nothing is in them. The table is set as if she's expecting company. The phone, old-ass landline, the cord is cut. Explain. We tried to call her, comment on the phone, laugh nervously. She won't mind. What? She won't mind. Regret asking anything now, repeats it a third time. I don't acknowledge it. Would you like to see the medicine? She nods but gets stuck in the motion and sort of just sways her head while watching me. I walk over to her, take medicine out of the delivery bag and open it. Only difference is the pill is white rather than blue. Immediately she takes the pill. No water or anything, just swallows it. Ask if she wants to give me cash for the medicine. It was like $8. Or to just send her a bill. Calmly takes medicine bottle and dumps them all down the sink. Lets out a banshee scream, grabs my arm. Her head is swaying more violently now. She is surprisingly strong. Wrench free of her grip, start backpedaling out. She's screeching now, messed up voice. Come in, won't mind, she mind, come in, won't. Words are becoming progressively more garbled as I sprint back to my car. Cats are all hissing at the doorway as I walk out. Chickens have flown the coop because they're smarter than I am. Jump in the car, turn on headlights, slam it into reverse and BTFO. Look back at the porch before I leave. See a tall, misshapen, shadowy figure in the doorway thrashing about. Looks like it's shattering Christmas decorations on the porch. Looks up at me and waves. Nope out, run like 80 down this dirt road, see movement in the woods, slam on brakes. Deer is not stopping my escape. It's the woman. Keep going. Get to the paved road. The woman standing in the middle of the road. She runs up, grabs my car door, screaming at the top of her lungs. I will drag you to your death. Hear through the window. It's in the house. It's in the house. Not today, Satan. Speed down the highway, leave her standing there, get back to the pharmacy covered in a cold sweat. Calmly get my coffee mug and say I'm going home for the day. Call the store owner, explained what happened. He's a bit skeptical. Next day, sends the regular delivery guy out to check on the lady. Says he found her sweeping glass off her porch, whistling to herself and had no recollection of the day before. Phone was still out of service too. To this day, we no longer deliver outside of the city limit.
Let me tell you a bedtime story. When I was younger, I was separated from my family due to my mother being an unfit parent and my father nowhere to be found. Anyways, I had 2 brothers and 1 sister. I was separated from my younger brother and sister, but my older brother and I were eventually made to go live with this older couple out in the middle of nowhere. We lived in what I can only describe as a log cabin, really well built with a brick fireplace and everything. It was actually very cozy and I enjoyed living there. I have fond memories of having fun running around on the property, which was pretty big. Our first Christmas there, my foster parents, never adopted us, got me a Teddy Ruxpin. I immediately found it creepy. I couldn't sleep very well due to it. I was probably around 6 or 7 at the time. My brother and I shared a room and he had a bed horizontal to mine. Due to the Teddy Ruxpin always freaking me out, he usually went to sleep first. One night as I was laying there, I heard the Teddy Ruxpin's animatronic sounds start to do its thing. I looked over and my brother was fast asleep. I peeked toward the Teddy Ruxpin and it was still in the same spot I left it, but I saw something move near the foot of my bed. I looked down and saw a goddamned gray-type, big black-eyed alien, like in the movies, peeking from it atop the foot of my bed at me. My heart skipped a beat and I felt like I was going to die. I was too scared to call out to my brother, too scared to move, and I was afraid that if the damn thing saw that I saw it, it would do something to me. I kept my focus on it, and it got up making no sound at all while keeping its eyes on me. I was peeking through my eyelids from the moment I saw it, BTW. It moved so close to my face at one point that I closed my eyes out of fear. When I opened them slightly a bit later, it was suddenly gone. I woke up the next day, and nobody I ever told about it has believed me. I am 29 now, and I still remember it clearly.
Background info. Be me, single mum, 5-year-old son. My husband died 3 years ago, crushed to death in a machine at work, settlement money, bought a Victorian house that was modified into 4-plex. The front of the house is our apartment, sunroom up front. The first tenant has to walk past our apartment to get to their apartment on the first floor. Walk past the first tenant's door to back door. The back door of the house leads to the stairwell. The door has been modified, needs to be buzzed in and out of the stairwell or have a key to prevent package theft. Those stairs give access to all apartments but also the only way to top 2 apartments. I rent to these people so I can work at home part-time to be there for my son. I have a great son. Smart, talkative, gentle, funny boy. Friends with everyone. Sometimes too friendly even. I spoil him at Christmas and birthdays. His grandpa on his dad's side comes disguised as Santa to visit every Christmas. My son loves the visits from Santa. Around December, talks about Santa all the time. This year he started to talk about Mrs. Claus. Weird, also hoped he would drop it so I didn't have to try to get a Mrs. Claus will come to visit this year too. My son and I have a usual morning routine. Breakfast, bath, then I get him set up in sunroom to play for an hour or 2 while I work in the living room adjacent. This day, I can hear him talking a lot. Sounds like he's having a conversation. I go to check on him. Our goofy dog follows me into the sunroom, goes crazy, runs to window barking and losing it like he just saw the devil. Not like dog, maybe a rabbit or something. Son says it was Mrs. Claus is coming to visit. Okay, weirdo. And I go back to my work. The dog won't come with me though. The dog won't leave Son's side. 2 more times I hear the dog bark and go ballistic at the window. People walk by our sunroom all the time to get to the back. He is used to it. Not sure why he's so upset. Then I hear a loud crash. Son starts crying. Dog losing his mind. I rush in. Nobody is around the sunroom. Dog freaking at the window. Son freaking too, saying, Mrs. Claus threw a rock at dog. Mrs. Claus mean, etc. I take my son to another room and try to figure out what, if anything, he saw. He said he couldn't tell me about Mrs. Claus because then the Christmas magic wouldn't work and Santa wouldn't come. He said some other things about her magic, talking to him and offering him snacks and doing magic. Sounded like they were pretending to be me. Still call Grandpa over to hang out with us for the rest of the day. He leaves that night. Dog wouldn't stop pacing around the house that night. Next morning, usual routine, but asked my son to stay in the living room with me. Dog in backyard playing. About 30 minutes later, I went to get the dog. The dog is dead, foam coming out of his mouth. Nothing wrong with him externally. Son is not okay. Vet said it would cost serious dough to do labs and an autopsy to figure out why he died. He was 7 years old and a large breed. Vet said probs natural. Still tragic. Son and I go home heartbroken. Later that evening, my son is hanging out and playing while I make dinner. Hear him giggle a little for the first time all day, then he goes silent. I ran to go check on him and he's laying flat on the floor, lips turning blue. Call 911, go to the hospital. Turns out son had somehow got a huge dose of Benadryl and overdosed. CPS is called. Now CPS is coming around as if things weren't bad already. Child-proof our house even more than it already is. Locks on the tops of doors, medicine in the safe, etc. Hardcore child-proofing also won't leave my son alone at all now. Start sleeping on the floor in his room. Hear his little voice talking late at night. Sounds like he's having an argument. I shoot up fast and hear some banging noises. See nobody. Again he says he was talking to Mrs. Claus. Starting to think it's a ghost? Go back to sleep. The next morning I got a call from the tenant. Squirrel trapped in the back staircase. Someone propped the door open and the animal got in. I chase it out, close the door, and hang a sign reminding everyone not to prop open doors. The whole time I felt watched, starting to think the house is really haunted. Go inside and do our morning routine. While drinking my coffee, I started to feel weird. Blurred vision, extreme fatigue, unsteady. I knocked the coffee mug over in my stupor. Spills. I noticed some white powder at the bottom of the cup I tried to call Grandpa. Drop the phone. The back doorknob starts to turn. The door was unlocked. The only thing holding the door shut was the child's safety lock at the top of the door. Son starts screaming and crying to let Mrs. Claus in. Grandpa shows up, and then the police show up shortly after. Locked in the back staircase, clawing at my back door like a rabid animal, was a white-haired, toothless old woman. She was skinny and emaciated and smelled like feces, clearly homeless, but with white curly hair and wire-rimmed round glasses. In the bushes surrounding the outside of the house, police found empty bottles of Benadryl, a step stool, some blankets, cans of food, and tons of trash. This woman had been sleeping outside of my house, talking to my child, convincing him to do things, even throwing stuff over the fence for him or through open windows. She had convinced my son to dump a powder into my coffee that morning and convinced him to unlock the back door. She had been buzzed in mistakenly by a tenant and propped the door open for herself to come back later. She came back and hid. She probably watched me chase the squirrel around and hang the signs up. She had been tapping on windows, trying to get my son's attention. When I tried to call Grandpa, the call went through before I dropped my phone. He heard the woman screaming. I don't even remember her yelling. He heard my son screaming too and rushed over, called 911. I had to explain to my son that she was pretending to be Mrs. Claus, which made him realize Santa as a whole is people pretending. This is the second worst Christmas we've ever had.
Alright, /X/ I'm gonna need your thoughts on this. Not exactly sure where to start, so excuse me if the consistency is awful. Be me. Alright guy, recovering from a horrible relationship back in 2015. Constantly thinking about my ideals of a girl. Thought about it often. Never truly dated for love after the past relationship, constantly hooked up. Lots of sex thanks to Tinder, wished on my birthday to be with my idea of an ideal girl if she exists. Basically, I wish to be loved. Fast forward a month, get into a shitty relationship. Lots of sex, lack of respect, no love. Shitty all around. Leave her. Depression strikes again, a sense of dread thinking I won't ever meet the literal girl of my dreams. Fast forward. I ended up following this girl on social media a couple months later. Really cute. Incredibly attractive to me. Like, wow. Think nothing further of it. Never met her. Probably out of my league and probably on the other side of the planet. Continue on with life. Seeing her updates. She's also feeling just as lonely. Actually do a bit of a check on her profile. Her first post was on my birthday. All her social media just spontaneously popped up during my birthday this year. Kinda scoff the coincidence. Think nothing of it. Fast forward some more. I ended up meeting this girl on Tinder. Stupidly hot. New in town, wants to meet for dinner and maybe more. Cool. Day before the date, she gets really sick and needs to cancel. I'm not even mad. Spend the day of the canceled date late Christmas shopping. Heading to the mall. Check cute social media girls' posts. Posting pics of food. Doing all my shopping in the mall. It's freezing at the food court. It's my horrible ex from 2015. She sees me. I pretend not to see her, grab a bite, and go right off. Haven't seen her in a whole year. What's going on? I take the public train towards downtown, check social media again. More food pics. Something starts feeling really off about the pics. They look familiar, but they're just pics of food, nothing unique at all. Do my shopping downtown. Take the train back to previous mall, check social media again. Checks cute girl's profile once more. Wait, what the hell? She lives in my town? Start feeling cold. I get off the train. Train is an outdoor train, so you can see the opposite side of the station easily. Sees a girl on the other side of the station as I get out of the train and it moves on by. Looks a lot like the cute girl, getting spooked, but keeping my cool. Probably just tripping balls now. My imagination is absolutely screwing with me. I go downstairs to leave the station. As I beep out, I see the girl also beep out. I walk to the bus stop to take the bus to the farmer's market. Girl is behind me. I stand by the bus stop. Bus stops. Not my bus. Girl is about to go on. Gets a good glimpse of her. Wait, it's the cute girl. Absolutely spooked. What's going on? She looks at me, and we continue to stare at each other as she gets on the bus and it drives away. She lives in my town. That bus she took drives towards my house. Genuinely freaking out. No idea how to react. Take the other bus to the farmer's market. Check her profile again. I swear I'm hallucinating. She's magically mutual friends with an old childhood friend of mine from way back, and mutual friends with an old high school acquaintance. What the hell? Go home. Pit in my stomach. Nervous as hell as to what's going on. I've never met her in my life once until today. I'm actually getting spooked at this whole thing.
Hey X, I don't normally post or browse here, but I think you guys are all I have left in terms of figuring out what's happened to me. Let me give you a rundown of the situation. It all started last Christmas. I was more bored than usual and in a bit of a depressive state, and my best friend, whom I normally spend time with 4 or 5 times a week, was in jail. I had nothing to do and no one to do anything with, and this resulted in me sort of falling in with a bad crowd. I would spend my time hanging out at the local mall, looking at the holiday decorations and people watching, and that hobby worked pretty well to stave off boredom and depression for a while. Until one day, while I was eating a pretzel and drinking lemonade, I was approached by a strange group of teenagers. Now, even though I was 22 at the time, I've got a baby face and they must have thought I was a teenager too, or someone who had recently graduated high school, because they sat down at my table and started talking to me. The leader of the group remarked how he had seen me looking at a copy of the Simon Necronomicon at the mall's bookshop the other day, which was true. I thumbed through it for a while, out of curiosity more than anything, and asked me if I was into the occult. I told him that I had done a bit of reading and had a passing interest in it, which is also true, although I may have embellished my reading list. Again, I was very bored and desperate for some kind of human interaction, and he said that it was cool that I was interested and that we should hang out sometime. I told them, full disclosure, that I was 22 and it might be weird to hang out with a bunch of teens, but they said it was cool, and one of them even remarked that I could buy liquor for them. I thought nothing of it and just figured they needed the token old friend who could get them wine coolers or whatever for their parties. I spent about a month hanging out with them at the mall and partying on the weekends, and it was mostly completely normal. The only thing that was out of the ordinary, which I completely ignored at the time, was the occasional fight between the leader of the group and a person who I assumed was his girlfriend. I know a couple fighting, especially a teenage couple, shouldn't raise any red flags, but the nature of their arguments is what first started to set off some warning signs for me. Everything would be completely normal in the group, and suddenly the girl would break down in tears or start yelling nonsense at the leader of the group. Vague stuff like, "You can't do this," and the like. As time wore on, the two of them became more and more estranged, and I would get texts and Skype messages from the girl asking if I had seen Jeremy, the leader, and that he hadn't talked to her in days. It turned out Jeremy was spending nearly every night at an abandoned house, turned all-ages social club by a few of the local college dropouts. This house had sort of a reputation for being a place for burnouts and junkies, and naturally the group was pretty worried about Jeremy. No one else in the group dared go near the house though, because someone once got stabbed there, and they were all afraid, which is completely natural. Now, I've been around the block a few times myself, and I've experienced quite a bit in my short life. I know how to deal with junkies and weirdos, so I volunteered to go visit the place and see what was up with Jeremy. It had been almost 3 weeks at this point since we had all hung out together, and Jeremy wasn't returning calls or texts. It only made sense that this is where he would be, so I went looking for him. This is where I made my mistake. I ended up going to the house one weekend night. I knocked on the door and was let in almost instantly. The place was a very typical flop house. Lots of homeless dudes and drug users all sitting around on busted-up thrift store furniture and shooting up. I was welcomed so readily because I brought a few bottles of gin. I walked inside and introduced myself and asked a few people if they had seen Jeremy. As soon as I started asking questions, the demeanor in the room became very hostile towards me. People stared at me like I was here to arrest them all, and one homeless guy even asked me if I was a cop. I laughed off the accusation and explained that I was a friend of Jeremy's and I was worried about him. After I was given the runaround a few times, someone finally told me Jeremy had gone out with a few other people to pick up some food and would be back soon. I found a place to sit down and figured I'd wait. I reached over to the table where I had set my drink down and took a sip, and this is where my memories of that night start to fail me. Looking back on that night, it's obvious to me now that I had been drugged, but when it was actually happening, I had no clue what was going on. I sat there for ages, dissociating heavily, telling stories to a homeless guy next to me and laughing it up. Finally, after what seemed like ages, Jeremy got back to the house. At this point, I was nearly passed out, stumbling all over the place, unable to form a complete sentence, and generally making a huge mess. I was only moments away from blacking out. I tried to go talk to Jeremy, but he was engaged in a heated discussion with another man, someone I hadn't noticed in the house before. This guy Jeremy was talking to was something else. He sort of had this magnetic quality to him. He was the kind of person you saw and instantly wanted to talk to. He was dressed far too well to be in a place like he was, and he smelled like very expensive perfume. I managed to stagger my way over to Jeremy and the strange man. I tried to tell Jeremy that we needed to leave right then, but he refused. And the last thing I remember before blacking out completely was the strange man locking eyes with me and inviting me to stay the night. The next morning I woke up at home with dried blood coming from my nose, several bumps and scratches around my face and neck, and no memories of the night before. After doing a bit of detective work, I was able to figure out that at some point the previous night, I had called a cab to come pick me up, and that's how I got home. I was unable to figure out what else happened. I tried to contact the group of friends I was hanging out with, and I was told that Jeremy's parents had thrown him in the hospital after he apparently suffered some kind of breakdown. As far as I know, he's still in the hospital somewhere out of state. No one else in the group will talk to me, and I'm too afraid to return to the house and confront the people there. Now, the reason I ask if I was cursed is because ever since that night, I've been very sick. I throw up after I eat now, no matter how much or how little I eat. I am constantly running a fever. I am plagued by horrible nightmares every night. I am sleeping less and less. My skin is turning pale and brittle, and my hair has changed colors. Was I cursed?
Be me. About 3 years old at the time. It's Christmas. Only thing I remember vividly is that I got a kick-ass mystery machine toy. Too young to realize serious matters. Previous night, my grandfather died. Don't remember going to the funeral. Don't remember Grandpa. Later down the road, playing some board games by myself, still very young. Mom walks in. Anan, what are you doing? Look up at her and smile. I'm playing with Grandpa. TFFW. My mom thinks I'm playing with my dead grandpa. My face when I hear this story as a young teen. Cry when I realize how close me and him must have been. Still don't remember anything about me and him. Can't even remember his face if I saw it. Fast forward to when I'm in high school, junior year. Visit retirement home for Christmas festivities, where my grandma lives. She doesn't recognize me due to some form of Alzheimer's. She doesn't remember many things, not even me when I perform with a small group of singers. Walk up to her, introduce myself, asks who I am. It's me, Anan, your grandson. Looks at me confused. I'm Marty's son. Realizes it now, but still doesn't help. I have 4 other brothers. We all look exactly the same. Oh, of course. So are you married now? Explain that I'm not married, still a teenager in high school. Say goodbye. She died this summer. Sang Ave Maria at her funeral. Didn't cry. Didn't know what to feel. First time in my life that I ever see my dad cry. I don't. Stay at the cemetery for a while. Not sure what to think about it all. Still wonder if I really played a board game with the spirit of my grandpa. I've always felt a close connection to my grandfather, which seemed strange, but I always wondered what would happen if I got to know him. Visit his grave every Memorial Day. He fought in World War II on the Kitkin Bay, pick related. I miss him, even though I never really knew him.
Good to see /x/ is still around. I left 4chan years ago, but I used to browse this board a lot. I would ask people about this supernatural experience I had, and I got a lot of interesting responses, but it kind of felt mentally overwhelming to discuss it, so I stopped for a while. It just wasn't good for my vibes to be on here. I've now translated my account into a Greentext, and I'm ready to hear possible explanations. Be me, 14, living in Elkin, North Carolina. Older brother Tyler is 16. We're close. We had a whole lot of woods behind our property. It went on for a while. Christmas break, all the trees are dead. The ground is really thick with leaves. We go out for a walk like we often do. We don't talk because we can't hear each other over the crunching of the leaves. We get to this creek, which may or may not be deep into someone else's private property. We're not sure. It's not very deep, but a few yards wide, sandy creek bed, leaf clumps by the banks. We are about 15 feet from the water. Tyler is balancing on a rotting log, talking. I'm standing nearby. Windless, chilly, overcast sky, and I suddenly felt uneasy before anything even happened. Then there's a noise across the creek like a footstep. Tyler stops talking. The noise comes back and we see some leaves kick up on the other side of the creek. It's like a little puff of leaves just kind of explode upward a little, with a crunching sound you'd expect. Hard to describe, I know. It keeps happening across the creek, with maybe like 2 seconds between crunches. Each crunch is a few feet away from the last. There's some animal over there playing in the leaves, says Tyler. A mouse probably that's routinely jumping for some reason, but it's also somehow covering a lot of ground between jumps. Crunch, crunch. The crunching comes toward us in a line, reaches the creek. Silence. We watch the far bank to see what it is. Seconds pass. A crunch on our side. I think it's got to be a wind vortex or something. My heart is pounding and hasn't moved. Crunch. I'm staring at the spot, really looking for something in the leaves. Crunch. Tyler is gone. My heart stops. He's gone. He's vanished. He's not on the log or anywhere. He was there 1 second ago. There is nowhere to hide with all the leafless, skinny trees, and if he touched the ground at all, even really far away, I would hear it. I can't stress enough how there's no way he could have disappeared that quickly. He's been taken. Crunch right in front of me. I'm running. I have no idea if the thing is still chasing me. Run for my life back home. My chest is killing me, but I cannot stop running. Have never been this scared. I'm looking around wildly for Tyler. He is not anywhere. I should have seen him. Get to my backyard where my mom and Tyler are both waiting for me. He's alive. They look terrified, asking what happened, and I can't even breathe enough to explain. My lungs are frozen. Tyler says you disappeared. A lot of confusion. Apparently, his account is that the crunching stopped right when the thing crossed the creek. I remember a few more crunches on our shore, and that I had vanished and he had freaked out and ran. I insisted that he disappeared first, and then I ran. They had been waiting for me for a full minute, according to Tyler and Mom. What? That timeline makes no sense. Why was I that slow getting back? Mom says we both got spooked and ran at the same time, but that still doesn't explain how he got back so fast. Lots of talk. She gets pretty worried about us because of how freaked out we were. We go inside and get warm. I take a shower to clear my head. Me and Tyler talk about this non-stop for months. It becomes a whole thing where we finally build up the courage to return to the creek half a year later, but we don't find anything. I don't tell a lot of people, and I gradually start downplaying how scary it was to my friends that I did tell. Very emotionally scarring, very strange. Moved a few years later. Michael and I will still reminisce. We wonder if we imagined it sometimes. I have no idea what happened, and as far as I know, nothing like that has happened to anyone.
Good morning /x/. I don't have anywhere else to go with this, so I wanted to bring something here even though I don't really post here. Maybe, just maybe, I might get some external input from people wiser than myself. This is about how a dream I had last night disturbed me this morning. I should set the stage so it makes some sense. I've been alone all week. The rest of my family has gone off on a trip. I spent the first day or two indulging in all the vices I wanted to indulge in but couldn't for want of assured privacy. And since then, I've been fairly mellow and disinclined to do anything extreme. I've expelled my extremes for a time, or so I thought. It will also be necessary for me to tell you a couple things about my relatives. My mother has been dead for almost a decade now. She had her flaws. She was given to depression, hoarding, but she channeled her mania and acquisitiveness positively by being a preschool teacher. Her absolute favorite time of year is coming up. She was really into everything from Halloween to New Year's. Christmas was a particular favorite. Usually I can arrive at a conclusion about what my dreams were trying to tell me. I can be confident that I've arrived at a result or learned something from re-examination. I don't know where to go with this dream. So, the dream itself. The other people in the dream were my immediate family, my father, little sister, and my mother. The last one was out of place because she was supposed to be dead. The rest of this I might have out of order. I'm already starting to lose details. It took place over roughly 3 days that got all jumbled together as dreams do. It took place in the home I grew up in, but it was even more of a wreck than usual. The bathroom on the first floor was unusable and filled with a jumble of furniture as if it was being used as a storage or staging area for remodeling and redecorating going on everywhere else. My old bedroom was orderly, but at first my windows were open when usually they would be closed. There was also an AC unit in each window, which never happened. Looking back, these were dream clues that I missed. In the dream, I was too concerned over how irregular they were and trying to figure out the other irregularities that I didn't recognize they were just elements of a dream. I remember asking, how can so much of this be all a who in only 2 days? Because my mother had been back for just a couple days and we'd started doing all this stuff. I wasn't happy with the way my father had thrown himself into and accepted my mother's return, and how we'd been doing all these things that were messing everything in our house up, maybe even spending all our money too for it. Did I mention how much of a wreck and a mess everything was? Even the food was off. I distinctly recall a snack pack with a sliced cheese tray, something we would have around the holidays. I had a slice and it was dry, dusty, almost moldy. I didn't like it. There was also some turon, something I tried to make recently, but it was really runny, and the almonds were soft and mushy like pineapples. I disliked that too. I hardly ever eat in my dreams, so this was unusual in and of itself. My sister didn't like the situation, but she wasn't experiencing the cognitive dissonance I was. She disapproved of what was happening, but she wasn't about to confront my parents about it like I wanted to. She agreed that my mother was supposed to be dead, and that my father was acting like everything was okay, like she'd just come back from a long business trip instead of from the grave. When I got around to making the confrontation, she got stressed and didn't like how everything was that much worse because of it. I remember she was frustrated and said that she needed to do something. It weirded me out. I didn't expect to hear that, and I didn't want to know that much information. I already forgot what it was. In addition to the house being a terrible mess, the driveway and street in front of our house was covered in toys, books, clothing, all the things my mother would hoard, and it was being lain out and given away, I think. I saw some random kids come up the street in the snow and happily take the toys on the road. At the time, I found it uncool that we were throwing away the cash that we would have had to pay for those things. There was also this SUV of women who we saw in the driveway, like they were scouting out what to take, and my sister and I didn't like them for some reason. They drove away without getting out of the SUV when we saw them, and ran over a couple toys on the way out. They did not reappear. Things came to a head rather quickly when I confronted my parents about my mother being there. They were leaving the house to go out on a date or something. I remember she was in a red dress that wasn't typical for her. I called her out, asked my father why he was going along with this when something was clearly wrong. I called her the names of monsters. I reminded her that she was long dead. She responded with denial and anger. I finally snapped, and I remember I said, "In the name of Christ, I abjure thee, demon." My mother had been religious, I'm not that religious, but I know how some of it works. Anyway, she looked really stricken by this and didn't talk to me again. In fact, she left. I didn't see her for the rest of the dream. My father, when I asked him later, told me that she was really upset and that there were like 12 doctors keeping an eye on her. He was upset that she was upset. I then tried to get him to explain how this had all happened, when and how he met this thing that masqueraded as our late mother. He didn't want to say at first, but I kept pressing. He tried to start to tell me that he saw her at a gas station. I repeated this, trying to grill him, and then realization started to hit me. All at once, I was aware that I was in a dream and that I wouldn't get a sensible answer out of him because none of it was going to make perfect sense. I also felt crushing sadness. I felt like I had taken a chance to have a happy Christmas with my family, especially my mother, and I'd thrown it all away and ruined the experience with my need to rationalize, with my cognitive dissonance, and that I'd hurt my mother, who was maybe just here as a gift, to give us one more holiday with the family. I regretted it immensely. I felt a pang of sadness. I wanted to find my mother, to apologize, to make things right, to try to have that happy moment that I could have had in this dream. I said, I'm either going to stay in this hell dream or I am going to wake up. I wanted with all my heart to stay and fix it, but I woke up instead. I couldn't hold on to the dream. I couldn't stay inside it after fully realizing what it was. So I woke up for real and carried that guilt and sadness with me. I've been trying to understand what I experienced, what I might have been trying to tell myself, but I can't feel satisfied with anything I've come up with so far. So, /x/ I pass this on to you. Right now, I think the moral of my story is to not rush to reject something, but I'm not sure if I learned the right thing from it all yet.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.